Hello, guys. Welcome to the lesson two, right? So, welcome to lesson two. So, this is lesson 2A, right? Which will be looking at the controls and function, right? We'll be combining them together. So, we want to write a control. Well, write a control. So, we're going to write a function for that control, right? So, now basically, the controls has to do with the conditional ifs statement, the loop statement, which has to do with the while loop and the for loop, and then the control flow, which will look at the break, the pass, and then the continue. And then we'll look at how we can be able to write this in function, right? Because we all know that function is a block of reusable code. So remember that in this class we'll be using Python because that is the scope of this class because Python is a high level language which has so many programming paradigms, right? So one of the essential properties, it has one of the object oriented properties and also can be used for sequential and functional programming, right? So here I know that many of you actually don't know how to use Python. So before we start, looking at the controls and function, we're going to run our first program in Python. So what I'm going to do here, right, is to go to my local disk here and then create a folder and call it computer programming one, right? So I will open up my Visual Studio. I will open up my Visual Studio code, right? And then, okay, it's already here. So let's confirm open folder computer programming one. Okay, good. So now we showed in our previous video when we're looking at the web programming class, so we showed you guys how to install Python and also install Visual Studio. So if you don't know how to install Visual Studio and how to install Python, you can refer to our web programming lesson one class, right, to know how to install these things, right? Because I already installed it on my computer and currently I'm using the Windows 11 Home Edition to show this lecture, right? So let's get started. So for us to know that Python is actually on our system on Windows OS, so all I just need to do is to go to my command cmd and then open up this and then type Python dash dash version. So it showed me 3.12.6 is on my system, although there's an updated version which is 3.13, but that doesn't mean it still works fine the way I want it, right? So let's get started. So before we start, let's create a virtual environment. So because the reason of us create a virtual environment is this our computer programming class, because as we move on, we're going to be we're going to like use some external tools which require us to install them on our program. So we don't want to install them on the system, we just want to install them inside this program here that we're using, right? So we'll go to the terminal here. So to create a virtual environment is pi, right, dash m. So the name which is VNV, which is virtual environment, then the name of a virtual environment. So it can be John, it can be Philip, it can be Thomas, it can be anything, right? So but let's just use this uniform name which is env and then click enter. You can see this is our name. env is the name of our virtual environment. So the next thing to do is to activate this virtual environment, right? So to activate it, we're going to use the env, which is the name of the virtual environment, which is env. Then the scripts. Remember, it should be case sensitive. So scripts slash then activate. So this is the activate, right? So click on enter. So we are done with activation. So the next thing we'll do here is to write our script, right? So Python, to write Python script, let's start. We can give any name, right? Okay, let's do let me use app.py. Let me use app.py. So I'll click enter. Okay, now let's start. So to print our first program in Python, I can just say print hello world, right? So I come to my terminal here, and now to run this is py, or can put Python in full. Then the name of your script, because this code is inside this app.py, which is app.py, right? So it gives you this. But if you don't want to write the name in full, so you can put py app.py, still works, right? Hello world. So now there's another way to print, especially when we want to print a variable, right? Including a text, a string text like this. So let's assume we have a variable called num. which holds one, right? So now if I do this, right? If I do this, if I put num here, let's check. You can see it's wrong because it's showing a red icon here, right? It's wrong. So if I do this, let's see what this will give us. You say it's still wrong because it's telling that you can't actually concatenate string with an integer, right? You can only concatenate string, not int, right? You can see what happens. So now what if I want to put this inside this? All I just need to do is to put it what format, right? F, right? So I can enclose this. I don't need the plus, right? I don't need plus hello world num. So I will enclose the string. You can see it's not actually seeing the variable, it's still seeing num as a string, right? So what I just need to do is to put braces here. You can see what happens. So when I bring this, it will definitely work. Okay, now hello world one, you can see what happens, right? So we'll be using this all through, not all through, but most times we'll actually be like concatenating the string with our variable, just like this. So you can see how it works. So if I remove this f, everything becomes a string, right? Everything becomes a string. You can see hello world now. Okay, so let me add it back. Okay, so now let's start, right? So quick notes, we all know that a variable is a named storage location that holds a value of a particular data type, right? So it allows you to store, modify, and retrieve data throughout your program. We all know Python by default is implicitly typed, or you can say the variables are dynamically typed. So meaning you don't need to explicitly declare the type, their types, right? So the type is inferred by the value you assign to the variable, which we did here. In some programs, some programs to do this, right? So int, right? So int and stuff like this, right? So, but in Python, you don't actually need to do this, right? So implicitly, you actually understand that one is an integer and this data type, right, holds an integer value, right? So now the naming convention, right? So we need to understand how to do our naming conventions, right, in Python. So variable names must start with a letter, right? Uppercase or lowercase. You can see it, uppercase or lowercase, or an underscore. They can contain letters, numbers, and underscore, but cannot start with a number, right? So a variable name are case sensitive, so they can see A and A are actually different. So let's do a practical. Let's see. So assuming that I have A, which is 3, and I have A, which is 5, against 6, you can see they're actually different. So if I say A, right, it gives me this A, right? So if I say A, it gives me this one. So let's see this. You can see what happens. You can see they're actually different, right? So they're case sensitive. So it is a good practice to use descriptive names that indicate what the variables represent, right? It's actually a good practice. So let's move forward to the Python controls. You remember that the categories of the control are the conditional statement, which is the if condition or the else if condition, right? So the conditional statement is used to execute certain blocks of code based on specific conditions, right? So we can see definition here that control structures are essential for managing the flow of execution in your code, right? So we have the conditional statement, which has to do with if or else if, right? Then we have the loop, which has to do with the for loop and the while loop, which we'll be looking at here, but we won't be looking at the full problems here in this lesson. We won't be looking at data structure. We critically look at how we can be able to solve problems because all the problems, all the algorithms you'll be writing, right? So definitely there will be controls within these algorithms, right? Almost all programs you're writing, there'll be controls within these programs, right? There are always controls. So that you're writing the if condition, or you're writing a loop condition, or you are like integrating both of them to solve a particular problem, or the control flow statement, which is used to alter the flow of execution in loops and conditional statements, like the break, the pass, and also continue, right? So definitely you will use this as you move alongside with this lecture. So you need to understand this critically. You need to understand this very, very well, right? So let's move forward. Now we're going to be doing both because when we write a code, let's assume we're writing a conditional if, right? we're going to still write a function for that because I want to do the combination of both, right? So we all know that a Python function is a block of usable code that performs a specific task, right? So function help organize and modularize code, making it easier to read, maintain, and debug. So let's do a practical. Let's start with the conditional statement. Let's start with this, then we'll move on to this. Let's start with this. Okay. Now let me make a comment. To make a comment is the hash symbol. Let's put a conditional statement. Now I want to do a simple conditional statement. So let's say age is equal to 13, 14, right? So now we want to say if age is less than 14, right? Print he is a child, right? Then else column print is not a child. So we all know that computer is actually dummy. So is the any instruction you pass to computer, that is what it will perform. So we are saying that if age is 14, if age is less than 14, print it. So you can see that the variable age is holding 14 by default, statically holding 14, right? So when we say if age is less than 14 and we are saying that a variable age is holding 14, it means that this rule will not stand because by default age is holding 14. The rule will only stand if we say if age is less than or equal to 14. That is when this rule stands. So here, the only rule that will stand here is this, which is not a child, because age by default is equal to 14 and age is not less than 14. So if we print this, you can see is not a child. So if we put this actually will stand. He is a child because of the equal to sign, which means if age is less than or equal to 14, which this one stands, the equal to stands because age is a variable that holds 14. So this rule is true. So that's why it's printing this, right? This rule is also true, right? This rule is also true, right? When this is less than, but now this becomes true, right? This becomes true when this is less than or equal to. So you can see how it works, you can see how the program works, you can see how easy it is. So now let's assume that we want to dynamically write this in a function, right? As a function. So we need to understand something. So let's go back to our PowerPoint slide. Let me go to function. Now you define a function in Python using def keyword, followed by the function name and parentheses, right? Followed by the function name and parentheses, right? So any the parentheses can be the input parameters, right? So any input parameters listed inside the parentheses, right? Any input parameters listed inside the parentheses, the function body is indented below the definition. Now this is how we define a function. Now to define a function in Python is we use a keyword called def. Then let's say this we are looking for if the child is if the person is a child or the person is not a child. I can put is child, right, as a function name. I will show we'll explain the naming condition later, followed by parentheses like this, right? So there can be parameters here, right? So let's as know understand what parameter is, right? So you can see any input parameters are listed inside the parentheses. It means that if we're having parameters, that means the parameters should be listed inside these parentheses here, right? So the return statement is used to exit a function and send value back to the caller. So that means there should be return statement. So if no return statement is specified, the function returns none, right? So if no return statement is specified in your function, that means no results will be returned. So now what is different between parameters and arguments? So parameters are the variable listed in the function definition, right? So now We have def is child, right? So I can have age as a parameter, which is a variable, is listed in this, right? This is a parameter, and the argument is the value, right? So argument are the actual values you pass to the function when calling it. So when we call that function, the arguments we pass, right? The arguments are the actual values you pass. So take note of the parameters and the arguments. The difference between parameters and arguments. Arguments are the actual values you pass to the function when calling it, right? So we have a function called def is age, which is age. So column and then click enter, right? So now the age is not known, right? But we want to tell the computer that if the age is less than 14 years, then that age is actually a child. So what do we do? Let's use the condition because we are on the conditional statement right now. So we say if age, right, is less than 14, right? If age is less than 14, then return, you can say return and a string. Let's say he is a child, right? Remember, if you're writing function, we're actually using return, right? So return is a child, right? Then else return is not a child, right? So this is just a simple function for this conditional if, right? So if I'm to show the results, so I have to use real print, right? So I'll print the function, which the function is child. So the function have one, I'll pass the argument now, right? I'll pass the argument. So the arguments, let's use 15, right? So now let's read this. Now this 15 automatically, this age here, which is a parameter here, which is a variable here, we call the parameter, which the parameter is a variable, right? So this is a variable. Now this variable is holding this 15, right? So automatically this age becomes 15. So if 15 is less than 14, he is a child. This rule doesn't stand because 15 is by default is not less than 14, right? Else is not a child. So this rule will stand. So let's try and see. So if we run this, is a child, is not a child. Oh, sorry, let me remove this one. Let me remove this one. It's clashing with this, right? So let's run this again, right? You can see he's not a child, right? He is not a child stance because the 15, which is the argument here, is the age, which is the parameter here is holding this 15, right? So the age here becomes a 15. So 15 is not less than 14. So this argument, this rule will not stand, but this stands. So that's why it's printing is not a child, right? You see how programming is very, very easy, right? So now let's move forward, right? So we have understood this, and let's go to the types of function. So we have the built-in function. We have so many built-in function, right? So in this class, we're not going to actually use this built-in. We have already used this, which print is a built-in function, right? So this len is a built-in function. This len is to get the length, the total length of elements in a particular array, right, or a list. So this range is also a built-in function. We're going to use that when we're looking at loops. So this sort is a built-in function to sort numbers automatically in a list, right? So we have other built-in functions, right? So we won't be playing with Python. We're going to be exposing you guys to so many functions like the mouse mean and so many of them, right? So now the user-defined function. This is user-defined, the function defined by users. So you can see this function I did now. This is actually a function I defined, right? You can see I can actually use the function, right? You can see I can use the function here, right? And I can actually use the function in another script, right? All I just need to do is, assuming that I have another script, right? Let me call this script test.py. Now, if I want to use this function inside this app.py, all I just need to do is to call the from app from this script here, right? From app import. I'm telling it from app, you should import the function which is child, right? Is child. You can say it's child. But if there are so many functions inside this place here, and you don't want to be listing them one after the other, you can use this symbol star. So it gets all the function. It collects automatically collects all the function written in this app script, right? So if I want to use it here, I can just say, okay, print is child, because I already know the function, right? Is child. If I pass 15 here and it gives me my answer. So this time around, I'm not running the app script, so I'll be running the test script, which is py test.py, and it gives me the same thing. You see how it works now, right? I've already written my function. So this is called user defined function, and the function is inside is app.py, right? Which the rule is just one rule is 14, right? So we're going to add, or when we're going to look at sif, right? Sif statement, we're going to add another conditions. Now, if you want to add another condition to this function, we have what we call exif condition, right? The exif conditions, multiple conditions in a conditional statement, right? So you can see how the two scripts are actually working. This the function is user defined function is written here, and the test function, right? We call the user defined function here in the test.py. So let's quickly do at look at the nested if, right? Let's look at the nested if before we end this video because of time, so that we'll continue from the next one. So now we have the def is child, right? So we have if age is 14. So what we if we want to do this, we want to find out if, so say x, no, else if, that's how we write it in Python. Else if age is less than 18, else if age is less than 18, then what happens? Return he is a teenager. You can see what happens. So now let's go back to our code here. Now we have the age is 15, right? So let's go back to this. So automatically this parameter holds 15, right? Which is this variable here, age. It holds 15. So if 15 is less than this, right? This stands. Now let's look, but is 15 is not less than this, so this will not stand. So let's go to the second condition. If 15 is less than 18, yes, 15 is less than 18, right? This will stand. This condition stands. He is a teenager. So if we run this, what we return is he is a teenager. He is a teenager. So that is how just easy how to read code, right? So we have understood the if condition, we've understood the else if, right? So let's look at the naming condition before I end this lesson, and the other place we're going to continue less lesson because of the video size, right? So now advantage of using function. Now, code reusability. So you can reuse the function in different parts of the code. You can see how I did that. You can see how I reused that function, right? You can see how it is. So that's the advantage. So modularity. Functions allow you to break your programs into smaller manageable pieces, which will do, which you can see how it works, right? So readability. When name function can make your code easier to understand. So let's understand what naming conditions of Python. Let's understand how the naming condition works. So in Python, naming conditions for functions are important for code readability and maintainability. Here are the main conventions and best practice. Well, we have what we call snake case, right? So you can see function name should be written in snake case, which means that words are separated by underscore and all letters are lowercase. So let's find that if we right here. Yes, all our letters are lowercase. You can see the name of our function is child. All letters are lowercase. So descriptive name. Choose name that clearly describe the function purpose. The name should convey what the function does, right? So actually that name we choose, even if it doesn't actually describe the stuff, right? So when somebody says it's child, It's actually say, okay, are you trying to write a function to show if that age is child or not? So we need to write a better descriptive name, right? I won't say that name is actually correct, but if somebody says that, what goes to the person's mind is, are you trying to write a function that, okay, is child? We want to find out if that age belongs to the child, if that age falls in child, or what they're trying to do. So find a better name for that. So verb phrase, function of to perform actions, right? Function and verb is an action word. So it is common to start function name with a verb. So this convey the action being performed, right? We didn't actually start this that is our function with a verb, right? So these are just the naming conventions of Python. So avoid starting with underscore. So in Python, a little underscore in a function name is typically used to indicate that the function is intended for internal use within a module or class. So don't actually start this with, don't start your function with underscore. That's where we end this lesson for now. Where we come in now, next lesson, we're going to look at the condition. We have looked at the conditional statement, right? We have looked at the conditional statement, which the conditional statement allows you to run specific code based on whether a condition evaluates to true or false, which I've shown, right? So if condition, the else if and else, we have done that. So these are what some of the problems here. So like let's assume we want to pass an instruction computer to give the largest mid size to the eldest guy. It's the same pattern, right? The same pattern here, the same pattern here. So then let's assume that we want to pass an instruction to a computer to understand teenager. Okay, we have done this. So this is how it works. In the next video, we're going to look at loops, right? We're going to look at how the loops works, and then we're going to look at the control flow. Then before then, we'll look at the data structure and start solving some basic problem. Hope you understand this. Thank you and God bless you.